Welcome back to Twin City Sports Talk. I'm Nikolai here with Daniel, and the show is officially underway. All right, the Vikings lost 26-14 on Sunday in Tampa. That game kind of felt like the NFC Championship in 2017. They had the great opening drive and then pretty much nothing afterwards for that first half. Daniel, thoughts on the game?
I watched the whole thing, and it was not the best football I've seen. I feel like in the first half, Tampa Bay pretty much dominated the entire time. You were right about the first drive, but I feel like definitely Tampa played a lot better in the beginning, for sure. It was a close game. Minnesota had the chance to win, like take the lead at least at one point, and they didn't. A part of their issue is just their offense. They didn't target Jefferson enough. They forced the ball to Dalvin. It just wasn't pretty football. It was not the best that I've seen Kirk play either. He played okay. He didn't play great. They didn't pressure Brady enough. I was surprised with how well the corners did, though. They played very well for the amount of talent that Tampa has at their wideout position. So they played well there. Otherwise, it was just a case of Minnesota being Minnesota. It was questionable play calling on specific plays, but I mean, what can you do?
Yeah, I mean, a big part. There are two main things I want to get to here that played large roles in the Vikings' abysmal game in Tampa. First one, Vikings had complete control of, that being Dan Bailey. Dan Bailey 0 for 4 on kick attempts, and somehow, we're recording this Tuesday afternoon, somehow 0 for 1 on attempts at getting cut from the team. I thought he made a real good shot at that. So on Sunday, he chose not to kick field goals. He instead kicked every Vikings fan in the nuts. I just watched him play out of his mind on Sunday now.
Out of his mind? Yeah, no, not seeing that. I think that's a bad take, but no. Dan Bailey, this is coming from a Cowboys fan, and of course he kicked for the Cowboys for a very long time. He's lost his touch. I don't know if it's just the new area that he's in or what, but he is not the same kicker he used to be. I'm pretty sure he's 5th all time, or was at least 5th all time in career accuracy, and we did not see any of that on Sunday, clearly. It was not pretty football. I mean, I can't remember his exact stats, but the dude is a shadow of his former self. His leg is nowhere near as good, and he completely shanked one chip shot field goal. It was painful.
I mean, it seems like the most Vikings thing to do to have Dan Bailey be a crucial piece to that game in Tampa and absolutely poop his pants, and then go to a game in Chicago where watch the Vikings just blow him out and Dan Bailey does well in the game that we don't really need him.
The special teams has just been terrible. And I know last week we kind of talked about it a little bit, where if we just, you were asking me, Nikolai, whether or not we should fire the special teams coordinator for Minnesota, or if they should just hunker down and try and get through the season. If you're going to make a playoff push, there's not much you can do, but you have to figure something out. I don't know if it's bring up a kicker from, free agency, or I don't even know if they have one on their practice squad, but like they got to do something. Dan Bailey is not the answer.
They do have a kicker on his practice squad. I forget his name at the moment. But former Vikings kicker, longtime Vikings kicker, Ryan Longwell, said that the Vikings should stick with Dan Bailey and that his mistakes are easily fixable. I agree with that. I think Dan Bailey, going into these last 2 weeks, he's been solid. It got to the point where he walked out there and you're like, you know what? He has a pretty good shot at making those kicks. And then obviously Jags game happened, Bucs game happened, and he's kind of fallen off the cliff now. But I think he can rebound.
It's not a pretty year for kickers. And I don't know if it's just because it's 2020 and everything is terrible, or if it's just Dan Bailey, getting old, which I don't even think the guy's that old for a kicker, but I'd take Vinatieri over Dan Bailey right now.
I completely agree with you, but that's not going to happen because the Vikings don't do things like that. All right, moving on here to the other big part of that game that went against the Vikings. I hate to do this, but the officials were not great. Not great at all. That BB was returning a punt early in the game, went down. Then that Tampa Bay player came in and absolutely lit him up while he was down, fumbled the ball, but didn't matter. That wasn't called. Later in the first half, you had Harrison Smith, who had a questionable helmet to helmet call. If you're going to call that, you better call that thing where BB got absolutely killed.
I agree with that. I just don't think there was much of a bias, to be honest. I mean, we were talking yesterday. You kept saying how there's such a bias in the league towards Tom Brady. I don't see that at all. I completely beg to differ. And of course, because I'm a Boston sports fan and a Texas sports fan, y'all are gonna get pissed at me. But I don't think of course, the officials in the NFL are never consistent. That's just a factor of life. But this year has just not been a great year for football, and there's been a lot of missed calls. Don't get me wrong, especially in Patriots games, might I add. But I don't think a lot of those calls were too bad. The Chad BB one, absolutely, I agree with. The Harrison Smith, the only reason they threw that flag was simply because they're trying to crack down on targeting and contact to the head. That's the only reason that call went through. Otherwise, officiating, I think, was just fine.
And my point with that one was they didn't call it on BB, so there's a lack of consistency there. But that list goes on. You had that defensive pass interference on Jeff Gladney on Mike Evans, where he just slipped, negated a amazing would have been pick six. And then you had that defensive pass interference on the Hail Mary at the end of the half. That was the first DPI on a Hail Mary since at least 2009, depending on what you consider a Hail Mary.
I think you're right about that, but I mean, still at the exact same time, there's always you can pretty much always throw pass interference on a Hail Mary, or at least very often you can.
Yes, but they never do that. My point here is there were some outlandish things that were happening in that game that really makes you question the integrity of the game, especially when you have, obviously this is kind of shifting towards Patrick Mahomes, but one of the faces of your league competing for a playoff spot that they might lose if they lose that game.
Yeah, I do agree with you on that. Patrick Mahomes is definitely arguably the biggest moneymaker in the NFL right now. So that does make sense, yeah.
And so shifting away from the officials here, I want to move on to Mike Zimmer for a little bit. Mike Zimmer, early in the year, Vikings fans were calling for his head, and rightfully so. The team sucked. But, I mean, right now, after that loss, you really have to start thinking about, is he too old school for today's NFL? Because, I mean, every chance he gets, he just hands the ball to Dalvin, doesn't worry about it. I mean, if the Vikings get a 2nd and 2, let's say, they're going to give it to Dalvin, and he's going to get the 2 yards, and it's going to be all hunky-dory. But in today's NFL, if you have a 2nd and 2, you need to, especially when you have a guy like Justin Jefferson on your team, you need to launch that thing deep because he can burn cornerbacks, especially the sorry DBs that the Bucs had on the field Sunday. That one drive in the 3rd quarter, I believe, you just milked clock that entire drive, and you're down what, like 18 or something?
Yeah, I didn't agree with that play calling, but I disagree in the sense that you say that he needs to adapt to today's game because I'll simply say the Patriots are the #1 rushing attack in the entire NFL, and they're playing old school football. They've done it for the last 3 years, even when they had Tom Brady. But their scheme works, and no one's questioning Bill Belichick's greatness. And immediately Minnesota, I mean, I'm not going to lie, the first show that we did film together, we talked about, one of my takes was that Zimmer was going to get fired at some point because I think he's the guy for Minnesota. But I disagree with saying that old school football isn't needed because Andy Reid is an old school football guy. He's evolved, sure, but his play calling is pretty consistent from Donovan McNabb, Brett Favre, all the way up to Mahomes. Because he's always had a surefire guy that can toss the ball, and they've always had a solid running back in the backfield.
Exactly, and that's my point there. I don't think Mike Zimmer, Kirk Cousins isn't that solid quarterback that you're talking about. And I don't think Mike Zimmer, outside of Teddy, I don't think he's ever going to have another quarterback that he supports again. I think he's always going to be jaded because of that.
I think he supports Kirk just fine, but I feel like if Zimmer is going to build a quarterback, he needs to do it himself. It can't be a guy in free agency.
That's the thing. I don't think he can do it.
They have to draft someone.
I don't think he can do it. And I don't think Zim and Kirk are the combo that will get you to a Super Bowl. I hope they prove me wrong, but I don't think that's the path to the
I
Super
don't think
Bowl.
that entire Minnesota roster is something that's capable of winning a Super Bowl.
Well,
by not by players, excuse me, I mean by coaching. Gary Kubiak, sure. The rest of the coaching needs to go. Especially special teams.
I'd agree with that. The positional coaches are fine, especially the defensive coordinators and whatever. But I don't know if Mike Zimmer's the right guy for that. I think he's too run the ball, defense heavy, especially when you're going to go up against Patrick Mahomes in all likelihood. I'm just not sure if that's the right path.
I agree with you on that, but like I said, Bill Belichick is a run it up the gut kind of guy. He's a defensive first minded coach, and he lets Josh McDaniels handle the offense. That's what Zimmer needs to be doing with Gary Kubiak. And I will admit, Gary Kubiak had some excellent play calling, like where he with the fullbacks, CJ Ham. That was good play calling. You know, they got the first down several times. The QB draw with Kirk, that was very good. But what they need to be doing is running, I wouldn't say an RPO, but they need to be running more play action passes with Dalvin, because that's what Tennessee does. And Tennessee has just a good, if not a better running back than Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry, of course. And Tannehill is very similar to Kirk. He might be a little bit more mobile, but they're very similar quarterbacks. And we've seen the success that they have on play action passes. I think that they are number one in the NFL for running the play action pass. At 40% of their plays are play action passes on offense.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that.
To get implemented into the Vikings playbook.
It is there. They just need to do it more. I mean, I don't know why, but they kept turning to Dalvin on Sunday, and you just can't do that going forward, especially if you want to beat teams like the Saints or if you somehow make the playoffs now.
Well, that's what Tennessee does unique compared to Minnesota, is Tennessee's used to playing with a lead. You can only run the ball so much if you have a lead. And what's nice is that not Minnesota, the Titans have a decent defense. It's not great. They have talent there, don't get me wrong. So does Minnesota. But I definitely think that the Titans are more used to playing with a lead so they can run the clock out. And whenever they go on the field on offense, they're confident that their defense can either hold them or hold them to a field goal so that they can continue to score. The confidence and the momentum stays on Tennessee's side. And that's something that the Vikings just don't have. And I also don't think that the Bucs have that either, not since the beginning of the season.
That's another flaw with Mike Zimmer because, I mean, they can be down by whatever. They're going to have the same plan, just run it down their throat, throw play action sometimes. But if you look at teams like the Chiefs, they were down by a lot to Miami, and then they just flipped a switch and annihilated the Dolphins. That's something that Mike Zimmer does not do with his offense, or doesn't tell Kubiak to do with his offense.
You're absolutely right about that. And that's something that Tennessee tried to do against the Browns, is they were down by a ton of points. Mind you, most of the points they scored were in garbage time, but nevertheless, they came out of the second half just guns a-blazing throwing the ball.
Yeah.
Because they even the announcers said, don't be surprised if you don't see Derrick Henry for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Mind you, they implemented the RPO still, which it didn't really bite, but they implemented those deep passes, and they have the receivers to do it. Especially Minnesota has the receivers to do it. You have Thielen, who's an incredibly talented route runner, and you have Justin Jefferson, who's also a very good speedster. And, you could compare that to A.J. Brown and Corey Davis down in Tennessee. They're have better. The guys to do it.
The Vikings receivers are better, and I
never said they weren't. I think A.J. Brown is a phenomenal player, but the Vikings have the talent, and they don't use it. Yeah, so, how many targets did Thielen have? Because it felt like the entire game he wasn't getting targeted.
In the first quarter, he had a bunch, but since then, not many. Moving on to your, just wrapping the Vikings up here. So playoff odds currently sit at 20% for Minnesota. If they beat Chicago, that goes to 33. In all likelihood, they're going to go 2-1, beating Chicago and Detroit, and then losing to New Orleans. If that happens, the odds are 35%. But if you somehow do beat New Orleans on Christmas Day, those are 86%. And you really, at that point, you probably do make it, because I don't know if the Cardinals are capable of beating the Rams.
I do think the Cardinals are capable of beating the Rams. I just don't think that they'll do it. And I also need to say that I don't think the Saints are going to lose. But there's the likelihood of, one, a revenge game on the Saints' behalf. And two, the Saints haven't been playing great. They lost to a Jalen Hurts Red Eagles team, which they aren't very good, I should add. Jalen Hurts is arguably the most mature player I think I've ever seen play the quarterback position at his age. So they have that leg up. And I don't really think that the Saints were super worried about winning that game, because they pretty much have their division clinched, I believe. It's that number one seed, though. They needed to win that game, and they didn't. So if they need to win this Minnesota game, I don't expect Minnesota to win. But if they don't, I could see Minnesota winning the game if they rest their starters. But I don't think that's going to happen.
And initial thoughts on the Sunday's game against the Bears?
I think the Bears are going to win, and that's simply because one, Trubisky's been on fire recently, and I know I gave props to him earlier. He's been playing very well. They have good special teams. There's a shocker, and they have the better defense. I think that Chicago is the better team. I will say their offense is a little lackluster, but you have Allen Robinson, who is an incredibly underrated receiver, a great route runner. He's fast, he's quick. They have a good rushing attack. If Trubisky plays well, they win. If Trubisky plays like Trubisky, they lose.
I think that's a solid prediction. I think the Vikings are the better team. I think they game planned extremely well against them not out of the bye week, but a few weeks ago in Chicago. It really, if Akeem Hicks is on fire, I don't know if the Vikings now Kirk has improved, but if Akeem Hicks is on, you saw the difference in that Chicago game earlier. When Akeem Hicks went out, Dalvin was able to just torch the Bears. So if Akeem Hicks is like completely on, I don't see the Vikings doing that well against the Bears.
Which I should add, I'm pretty sure he is completely healthy right now. He's playing on fire.
Yep. So moving on here to the NBA, the Wolves had 2 preseason games this past weekend. They had a game against Memphis on Saturday. They lost that 107-105. That 105 is a little deceiving. Jalen Noel hit a last-second 3 at the end of the game. And then they lost again Monday to the same team, 123-104. So not great showings to start off the year, especially knowing that your offense is supposed to be the strength of the team, only scoring 104 and 105 in those games. My big gripe after the Saturday game was, I know he's a rookie, but Anthony Edwards did not shoot the ball enough. He didn't take, but he had these dumb passes that just got turned over multiple times, and he could have taken shots and probably could have gotten them knowing his talent. But it was just disappointing to see that. He did improve in the last game a lot, but I know he's a rookie, but he does need to get better if he wants to be a big part of this Wolves team, which they need if they want to make a playoff push.
And I'm going to say that I don't see them completely going to the playoffs. They're playing very mediocre right now, but it is the preseason, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. And I know early on I said that they have a shot at the playoffs. The more and more I look at it, probably not. Memphis isn't the best team for sure. There's a lot of better teams.
Yep.
The talent is there. The coaching is there. They just got to put it all together. I mean, they had the number 1 draft pick. You just need to work him into your offense. And hopefully your defense holds out. And if they do, then you should be okay. But if they don't, probably not.
The defense is giving up 130 plus a game.
Oh, that's neat.
Not now, but they're going to, because that's just how life works. The Wolves defense is terrible. But what I do want to talk about here, did the bubble help teams like Memphis, and especially those like the Lakers who went deep into the playoffs? And did it hurt teams significantly like Minnesota or Golden State who weren't able to play for such a long time?
Yes, but it also ruined a bunch of players. I'm not even going to bring up Pandemic P. He's a meme in himself. Giannis played absolutely god-awful in the bubble. I don't know what his problem was. He played so badly. The man can't shoot. Like, he won the MVP, and I don't know how, because Milwaukee lost in the playoffs. But whatever. Back-to-back MVP. Giannis is a great player. He sucked in the NBA, or in the bubble, excuse me. And I'm not even going to bring up Pandemic P. He's just... Pandemic P is built different and not in a good way.
All right. Well, I agree there. I think having that distinct advantage of being able to play, it's different than other years where you have teams going on to the playoffs, because you had that couple month window in spring and early summer where no one was playing. So you have an extended period of time away from the game if you're Minnesota, and that's a problem. And I think it's shown these last 2 games.
I mean, in their defense, we are in a pandemic, and so the NBA had to come up with something. And I think the bubble was a good plan, but you're right, it hurt a lot of teams that were trying to make a push.
There was a plan there early on where they were going to have like not a consolation, but that like losers bracket almost, where you'd have those teams out of the bubble that were going to have a separate bubble and just play games. And I think that would have been a great idea, and it would have evened the playing field a little bit coming into this next season.
I agree with you on that. Everyone's on an even playing field now, I would say. Everyone's
Yeah.
going to get the same amount of practice time. They're going to get the exact same amount of reps, hopefully. Worst case scenario, they go back to another bubble. And the NBA is a league that's small enough to where they can manage it. And if they do, then it should be okay. As long as Giannis doesn't suck this year, we'll be fine.
So I want to get into some of the offensive struggles the Wolves have had here early. Obviously, Cat has taken a step, at least in the last game, he took a bit of a step back. But I really want to talk about the forward position, the power forward position. Rondé Hollis Jefferson last night, we're recording this Tuesday afternoon, just clearing that up. Monday night, he shot 100% from the field, 17 points, played very well. You can't keep putting Jake Layman in the starting lineup if you have Rondé Hollis Jefferson sitting on the bench. That is stupid.
Unless it's like a weird tactic for your opponent to be like, hey, we're starting someone, but no, he's on the bench. Which it clearly isn't. But I mean, even then, when you have someone that's playing like as well as he did, he needs to be your starter. Like I was gonna bring up Gordon Hayward, but the more I think about it, he was mainly a bench player, even though he's getting starting money. That's a case where a guy needs more reps in order to get better. But the Minnesota does not have that issue right now. They just need to play their starters, and they should be okay. Their defense is great. Their offense isn't playing the best. They're just kind of a mediocre team, but they kind of remind me of Golden State from 2 years ago, where they just kind of had no one. I mean, Curry broke his wrist, and they weren't playing well. And but the opposite is that Minnesota has all their starters right now. And I don't know what the problem is, but they need to get their act together.
They really do, especially if they want to make a playoff push this year, which honestly, if they don't make the playoffs soon, they might straight up leave Minnesota.
Do you really think it'll go that bad? Like go through that route?
Yep.
Where would they move to?
Seattle or Vegas?
I could see a Seattle team. Not
I
gonna
can see a
lie.
Vegas team.
Yeah, but Vegas already has all the publicity going to the Raiders. The last thing they need is an NBA team. There's just too much going on in that sector. There's like nothing in Seattle. Seattle doesn't have a basketball. If Seattle had a basketball team, they would be arguably the best city right now for sports.
Okay.
Well, that is when the Kraken get implemented in the NHL, but that's not happening for a while.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about the NHL here in a little bit, but before we do that, I want to talk a bit about the University of Minnesota sports teams, mainly football, because that's what we know and talk about the most. Mohamed Ibrahim named first team All Big Ten and Big Ten running back of the year. He had a great season, average 150 yards a game and 2.5 touchdowns a game. I mean, he's absolutely incredible. Mariano Sori-Marin, linebacker, played well. In addition to that, he split time between the Mike and Will positions, not easy to do in PJ Fleck's system. And he also won Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week last week. Going back to Ibrahim here, do you think he has the potential to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft in 2 years?
That's a good question, and I'm just gonna say that I don't think his numbers matter right now. And that's not like a diss on his stats, but in college football specifically, your junior/senior season is your most important year.
Yep.
Think of it like a contract year in any sport. It determines really where you're going, because a player can get either so much better or so much worse in a matter of a couple of years, really. So there's a lot of players that have potential. I think you're right. He does have it. If he plays like it's just too early to tell. It's too early.
I agree with that.
There's a lot of freshmen that play well and then they just completely regress. And that's just kind of how it goes for a lot of people. But if he plays on the level that he's playing now for the next at least one season, he definitely has a shot to be a first rounder.
I'd agree with that. I mean, it is up in the air right now. Obviously, next year is going to determine a lot, but he does have the potential. I just don't. I see him being maybe day 2 guy. I'm not sure about day 1. That's a high ask for him. Moving on here away from football for a little bit. So as I mentioned earlier, we recorded all of this Tuesday afternoon, and we had a great conversation about how the Gophers men's basketball team and men's hockey team were both undefeated. But a few hours after we finished recording, the Gophers basketball team got their teeth kicked in by Illinois, so we had to scrap that, but what can you really do? Hockey talk coming right up. And now getting back into the NHL, having some hockey talk here. The Wild had a fantastic offseason, an A-plus draft in my opinion. The offense should get better. They have Kaprizov coming over, and later on they should get Marco Rossi, but they do need a number 1 center on that line. while Rossi grows and makes his way into that starting lineup.
I agree with you. Their main issue though is points in terms of defense. They need to get a better goalkeeper. They tried to address it this year, and I think they did, but they need to get someone that can really prevent as like aggressive points, aggressive scoring. Because if their offense is that great, your offense is only as good as your defense, especially in a sport like hockey where 1 point is the difference between everything. One play can cause you to win or lose, where in football or basketball, it's a series of plays that can lead to a score, but you can come back from that oftentimes. In hockey, I'm not going to say it's a slower game,
It's not.
but it's definitely
Lower scoring.
a lower scoring game. Yeah, it's a lot less aggressive than a lot of sports in terms of scoring. It's mainly a defensive battle. And if your defense in a defensive game is not great, you're not going to win very often. And they went a little bit above 500 last year, which for a pretty bad goalkeeper, that's not bad. Yeah, I'd argue that's the most important spot on the ice, but if they can upgrade that position, say 1-2 years, they are definitely a consistent playoff contender.
I think Capo Kakinen has that potential. He does need playing time. He does need reps in this coming season. I don't think Cam Talbot can carry the load, and I don't think Staylock is the answer at this point. He's not young. He's not getting any younger. Let's put it that way. Moving on here away from that, the NHL is realigning their divisions for this season because of the border problems with Canada and the U.S. They're having the Canadian division, and the Wild are one of those teams where you don't know exactly where they're going to be in terms of divisions. I've seen people that put him with the Pacific teams. I've seen people that put him with that middle, that new quote-unquote Central division, and that's looking like it will be the more likely option. They'll be with Tampa, which sucks, but also Chicago, Nashville, Columbus, Carolina, Detroit, and Florida. So they do have a decent chance to compete in that division for one of those top 3 spots in the playoffs for the quote unquote Central. Just early thoughts on the playoffs here.
Yes, I do think they'll make the playoffs. Last year, their roster is better than last year, and last year they almost made it and they went 500 roughly. This year, I think they have a shot.
I think they do have a shot there, especially considering that division. I think they have a shot to beat out Columbus even. That'll be a tall order, but I also think they have a decent shot at one of those wild card spots. Getting into some picks now. I had a bad week last week. I went 0 for 3 on game picks, 0 for 1 on predictions. Quarterbacks did not like me. Jalen Hurts, Mitch Trubisky, not great. And then Matt Nagy, obviously not fired. The Bears blew at the Texans. Daniel, on the other hand, you went 3 for 3, 0 for 1 on predictions. Adam Gase was not fired, unsurprisingly. You still have Doug Peterson getting fired by next Tuesday. That's on the board. And I still have Marcus Shales to the Vikings by Christmas. That is still there as well. So I'll start us off for this week. I have the Chiefs -3 in New Orleans. I don't think Taysom Hill is going to play. Drew Brees probably going to sit out another week. They have a short week next week to play the Vikings on Christmas. So I think Mahomes will get it done. He turned it on last week after a bad start. I mean, the Chiefs are able to do that. Anytime they're down, they can just flip a switch and just kill their opponent. And for that reason, I take the Chiefs. I don't think New Orleans is going to stand a chance with Taysom Hill.
Okay, so my first pick this week is a bit of an upset. I'm going to take Washington +6 over Seattle. They play at Washington, which, isn't much of an advantage. Go football team. And the reason I mainly pick this is simply because Washington is going to make a playoff push. Obviously, last week, the Giants fell short against Arizona. It was not very, it wasn't a really super close game. I think Washington is the more complete team. They have a significantly better quarterback in Alex Smith compared to Daniel Jones, who is one of the worst first-round picks I think I've ever seen. No offense to him. He's just not playing very well. He's a great rusher. But I think the Giants went from the 4th seed this week to the 12th seed after losing. Washington is going to see, hey, we can make a playoff push. We can finally get the football team going somewhere. They have a very good defense, one of the best defensive units in the NFL, and that is a fact. Their offense is kind of lackluster. Of course, they have Terry McLaurin. And I think that they just – I don't know. I just have a gut feeling. And Seattle is, a great team, but they lost to the Giants. And I think that Washington is better than the Giants, so give me Washington +6.
All right, my second pick here. I'm going to have Cleveland -4 at the Giants. Cleveland almost beat a vastly improved Baltimore team until Lamar Jackson came back and crapped on their face OBJ style.
Hey,
Ironically.
yo!
um, anyways, I think that spread should probably be a little higher. I think Cleveland's going to cover the -4. I think Daniel Jones is dead. Give me the Brownies.
My next pick is Tennessee, -10.5 to Detroit. Detroit is playing okay since the firing of Matt Patricia. It's kind of embarrassing considering that as soon as Patricia fires, they win, or gets fired, they win. You hate to see it, considering that he is one of Bill Belichick's subordinates. Oh, was one of Bill Belichick's subordinates, but Tennessee is just the way better football team. I mean, they almost made a comeback against Cleveland, and Tennessee is the better quarterback, in my opinion. Better running back, better defense, just a very good team, well-rounded, and I don't see how Detroit could pull this out.
I actually think Stafford's a better quarterback, but that's a conversation for another day.
Imagine.
My last game pick is going to be the Eagles +6.5 in Arizona. I think Jalen Hurts is a breath of fresh air for that team. I don't think Arizona's all that great. Yeah, they beat the Giants. Cool. But I think Philadelphia is going to put up a fight in Arizona. I like the 6.5 there.
I actually I think that's going to be a very good game to see this week.
God dang it.
I'm just saying.
You said that about one of my other picks, and it turned out to be wrong. Thank
I
you.
think it'll be competitive. I mean, I think it'll be fun to watch. That's all.
All right.
Okay. For my last pick, I have Buffalo winning against Denver, -6.5 at Denver. Buffalo is arguably the best team in the NFL, in my opinion. They have a better defense than the Chiefs. They have excellent weapons on the offensive and defensive sides of the ball. Solid special teams, which is a rarity this year. Great coach in Sean McDermott. Denver has Drew Lock. That's it.
Give me All right. Getting in some takes here. I'd say we have pretty spicy hot takes right now. Our first one's maybe not, but our second one is for sure. My first one, I have the winner of the Vikings-Bears game. I'm not saying who wins, but they will win by at least 2 scores, so at least 16 points.
My first prediction, it's kind of, I guess it's not that bad. People are saying that his job is secure. I beg to differ. I think that Anthony Lynn is fired on Black Monday. He took an excellent Chargers roster, absolutely gutted it, and now they are not very good. And I don't get how they lose so many close games. He's not the right guy, and maybe I'm wrong, and Spanos decides to keep him, but hopefully Anthony Lynn goes bye-bye.
All right, my last pick of the week, just because the football gods hate Minnesota and they spite us frequently, Dan Bailey's going to be perfect on kicks next week.
That's just not accurate. Kind of like Dan Bailey. My last pick, this is probably the biggest hot take of the entire show. I think that Trevor Lawrence will stay a 4th year at Clemson so he doesn't get drafted by the Jets. It puts his draft stock at risk a little bit, but I think that's a risk he's willing to take so he can not play in front of the New York media. I don't think he wants anything to do with that entire organization, and hopefully the Patriots tank next year so we can get our franchise QB.
All right, that'll wrap it up for the picks this week and do it for the show. Have a great week. Consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. Help more people find the show. Help us grow a little bit. And have a great week.